Yes, it's there.
All right. So welcome everyone. My name is James Serra. The session I'm going to talk about today is using generative AI on structured data. Well, let me go to my next slide. I've been working at Microsoft for the last 10 years. I just got my little 10-year anniversary, I don't know, crystal back there. And I am currently in the role in federal civilian. I work with a lot of federal US customers. So you're in Toronto, most of you, so probably haven't worked with any of your companies in there. But I focus on data and AI, and I've been and the 10 years I've been at Microsoft, I've had various roles in almost all exclusively in pre-sale. So I spend a lot of my time with customers, educating them on data architectures, products like Purview and Fabric, and the world of Gen AI has, since it falls under data and AI, has blended into a lot of the conversations I have with customers. And I'll give you some examples as I go along of how we're using Gen AI, the tools in there, along with structured data on there. So we've gone from just spending our time talking about databases or data lakes and using query tools and reporting tools like Power BI into a world where we're now starting to incorporate Gen AI. And I think we're just starting out to find how useful that could be on there. I've been in IT 40 years now. I won't go back to my COBOL days, but I've had a lot of different roles and present a lot on many different topics. And this one I'm excited about because I haven't, well, I'm losing my voice already. I've been presenting all day. I haven't done this presentation a lot. It's fairly new because of the technology is just so new. And feel free to ask questions along the way. I think you can come off mute. I'll pause at times. You can raise your hand along the way or put something in chat, and I'm happy to talk. I think we have like an hour and 20 or something, but I don't think I would go more than an hour. So I have plenty of time to take questions. If some of you want to make sure you come off, you put yourself on mute, unless you want to hear conversations with your family, I would say.
I'll be taking care of that, James.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah. All right, awesome. So the topic, the agenda for today would be, I'm going to level set with some Gen AI definitions. It's very confusing about all these terminologies. So I'll try to explain that and then dive into using tools like ChatGPT on semi-structured data. I know the title is structured data, but I also talk about semi-structured data, and I'll explain what that is. And then using Microsoft Fabric AI Skill, a feature of Fabric on structured data. And then I'll talk about some industry use cases. So starting out, we have data platform and AI, the worlds are colliding. It's amazing to think just a couple of years ago, nobody even knew what ChatGPT was. And now look how far it's come on there. And as I said, we're starting to see the use of ChatGPT, not just on text documents, but also on structured data and semi-structured data. And that's the focus of what I'll talk about today. I'm assuming a lot of you are not aware of some of these features. I was really not even aware of them until a few months ago, especially with AI Skill, because that's only been around for a few months. And then using ChatGPT or Copilot on structured data, on semi-structured data, like CSV files. I didn't even realize it could do that until a few months ago. All right, so let's cover some Gen AI definitions. And the first thing I want to ask just out loud is Gen AI magic? Because if you've used it for a while, especially ChatGPT, I actually think it is magic. I don't know what goes on really behind the scenes when you get into large language models, but it sort of seems like magic until you start seeing how it could be inaccurate. And so in the end, it's not magic, although many people seem to think it is. But let's dive into what what do we mean by Gen AI? And at a high level, you think of AI as something that's automated that performs tasks much more quickly than human intelligence. That's AI. Now, AI has been around for a while. There's various subsets of AI. And when you talk about machine learning, sort of the old school way of doing things now, and Gen AI, there's subsets of AI. When we look at Gen AI, think of generating new content. That's the big difference between that and machine learning. Generating new content used to be just text, but now if you used Gen AI, it's really amazing what you can do. And that reminds myself of I'm going to update this deck, which I'll send out, and I'm going to put in some links to some really good AI content that it could generate now. And if you've seen, it could generate pictures and video, and it could replicate people talking in their own voice, but you're making up their voice. Even within Microsoft, there's the ability to record my voice and then change my voice to speak other languages, but with my accent, my sort of New York, Long Island accent in there. And then taking one step further, it can take a video, a picture or a video of me sample, and then have it like I'm speaking and change my words, my mouth to match my words on there. So it's all generating new content. It could generate images. You can go to ChatGPT Copilot and say, generate an image of me riding a shark, and it'll put that up there. Or generate images, a video of that. I actually didn't put video in, and I should, of, and I'm gonna remind myself with some of these notes here. And it's going to be, the one sample I saw was show me the Old West, and as I'm walking downtown.
Hi, James. You go on mute.
Yeah, somebody did the all mute. So thanks for letting me know. Hopefully I wasn't talking too long. So large language models, and they're small language models. The one we're going to talk about mostly today is the large language models, and the idea that it takes diverse data sets, meaning, which we'll talk about in a minute, it could be the whole internet, and you pass in a natural language text, a question, into the large language model, and it generates new text to answer that question. I always tell people who are unfamiliar with LLMs or even ChatGPT, I'll say it's like a super smart autocomplete on steroids on there. So just like when you type into a Word document or in a search engine and it guesses your autocomplete, this is what a large language models do. Behind the covers, it's not magic. It's just links to what it thinks your next word is. And I'm just writing stuff down, some notes, pardon me, because I forget afterwards of like, what do I want to add to this? And one of them is a knowledge graph that I want to talk about very briefly in there. And it's just a way to link all these words together. So as you're sending this question to this large language model, all it's doing is guessing the next word and putting it all together to form a sentence. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but at its basic, the large language model, that's all it is. When we're talking about generating models for image and video, those are not using large language models. There are other specific models for something like that. So don't confuse large language models for doing everything. And there's tons of different models on there. Large language, small language, medium language models on there, and they all have different purposes. Machine learning, which I'll now call the old school way of doing things, is still used and still valid, and there's some crossover between that and large language models. But think of machine learning as predictive, helping with decision making. I could have customer data, and I can say, predict if this say they're a customer for a bank, predict if this customer is going to leave the bank in the next 6 months. And here's all the data from that customer for that machine learning model to estimate or predict if that person's going to leave. Maybe it looks at their bank account and the balances and comes up with a column in a database for each customer that says there's 80% chance this person is going to leave in the next 6 months. And then you can be proactive and maybe send them some, I don't know what you'd send me, coupons or something, or maybe a lower interest rate or a bank rate to try to keep that person from leaving on that. Now, within machine learning, you can think of an LM as a type of deep learning within machine learning, focused on understanding natural languages in there. So they're all kind of related and subsets of each other. And there's just a different purpose, because you may have heard of machine learning has deep learning as part of it, and deep learning is where ML fits in underneath there. But they could be for very different things. But used together, they can be extremely powerful and helpful. OpenAI was a company that came out, I think it started in 2000 and, I don't know, it's been 6 or 7 years since it's been around. And Microsoft invested heavily in it. Microsoft does not own OpenAI. They're just a partner with them. And that Microsoft's given them billions of dollars. Essentially, it wasn't that they handed over cash, but rather they gave them the compute that OpenAI uses. So most of what OpenAI runs on in the background is Azure servers sitting in some data center on that. They came up with models like GPT, which is what ChatGPT does, and other AI technologies that Microsoft licenses and other companies license in there. If you go to the ChatGPT, which I'll demo here, that is OpenAI's version of we'll call it a bot, which is the next line in here. Think of applications or bots that use these Gen AI models that allow you to interact with it. Copilot's another one, a popular bot. There's plenty of others out, and then you're asking questions. The question gets sent off to the large language model using and creates text and sends it back to you. So you have these conversational bots on that. But you can have large language models and all sorts of other applications, and that's getting used a lot. And then the last definition is prompt engineering. That's the idea of creating better questions to ask. If you use ChatGPT, you'll know it could be wrong a lot, and the way to avoid it being wrong all the time is to provide it with better questions to ask. Now, you can also train the model better, which I'll get into, but prompt engineering is a fancy name for asking better questions in there. And I use ChatGPT all the time, like, help me make dinner. And I find if you don't get very specific or give it a lot of background or other information, the answer, it could be way off or wrong. So you want to use prompt engineering to create better prompts to send to the large language models. All right. I think I don't see any questions yet. And by the way, I'm not a bot. We're getting there, and one day I could probably present with the bot of James Sarah, but not quite there yet. Alan, go, or is it Harrison?
Yeah,
Harrison.
Harry. It's yeah.
Okay.
I was actually asking. Well, it's sort of an odd thing, but I was sort of talking about it before people got in about potentially building a better interface with AI. For example, could someone? It might be sort of a radical idea, but a visual interface to work with an AI, like you draw an image and the AI tries to fill in the details of it and something like that. Like, I know that exists, but
yeah, it's pretty amazing what it can do now, and I keep coming up with crazy ideas of how you can do things. So the ChatGPT and Copilot can and some of this is not out for everybody to use yet, but I've seen demos of them being able to, well, obviously hear you. You can use ChatGPT to have a conversation with it. That's out now. It can also, not everybody can do this yet, see things. It could see the screen and you can share it, and it can help you with the gameplay by telling you, hey, you should go down right or left or pick up that object, as well as see you as a person, and you can ask it, hey, how do I look today, and have conversations with it by visually like that. And then that could lead to, and I was talking before about, you could train it. You could say, take a video of me and then recreate me, and take my voice and then recreate a avatar of me. Now, my thought was, wow, just think of this. And this could be kind of weird in a way, but I could have maybe a deceased relative, like a grandfather or great grandfather, and say, here's a video of them, here's their voice, recreate this person, and I want to have a conversation with this person. Maybe they'll provide me closure or whatever. So you can imagine where that can go on that. But that technology is here now, that you can do it. There's even I'm getting a little bit off the subject maybe, but there's an Instagram site I follow that takes, and it does this for sporting events, and takes a coach and pretends that after the game, using their video and their voice, it captures that and has it like the coach is complaining and saying things he really didn't say, but in his press conference, he's using curse words and stuff like that. And it's pretty amazing what they can do. And it looks real on that. And it's sometimes hard to tell if it's real or not. So the endless possibilities that you can do. I don't know if that answered your question, but it was a good topic.
No, that was excellent. I was mostly just curious about. Would you say? I guess it's sort of just a general thing. Would you say that prompt engineering is sort of a matter of getting it into a format that the AI predictive model can be useful?
Yeah, that's pretty much it on that. And I'll demo that when I get into the demo soon. Yeah, thanks. So let me jump ahead to ChatGPT 3. There's ChatGPT 4 that created a model on all of the data in the internet, in addition to a bunch of digital books listed here. And then ChatGPT 4 is trained on a lot larger data. We're not quite sure what. I haven't found anything publicly about that. So think of that, and this is what I tell people, is ChatGPT is like having a super expert sitting right next to you that read everything about the internet, that was on the internet, and now can answer your question. And in addition to books and Wikipedia and all that stuff. So that's why it's so smart, and the answers could be really helpful, and it can answer everything on there. And ChatGPT 4, and there's 4.0, there's a bunch of different models that are just keep improving. And who knows where we're going to be in 3 or 4 years from now. It's going to be amazing. A little bit of data definitions, unstructured data, documents like PDF, Word documents, text. You can, it's the old school way, although it's not too old, and a couple of years old, where you can ask questions of those documents. That's something we're all used to in there. You go to ChatGPT, you can ask the questions without any documents, and it goes to the internet and gives you a reply. You can say, here's a PDF document, I'm going to ask some questions of that and give me an answer to it. I've even taken my book and uploaded it into ChatGPT and said, I'm going to ask questions now, answer from my book, and it can do all that. That's all on unstructured data. Now we're getting into the new school way of asking questions on semi-structured data. This is generally tables, rows and columns in CSV files, Excel files. It could be Parquet files and all that. That's where we're going when the topic of today is, as well as structured data, which is relational data, tables that are sitting in a relational database. It could be any database, but we're going to focus on databases that are in Microsoft Fabric on that. And then, of course, binary data, you really can't do much with as it is. You want to pull out information about that, and then you can do the stuff on that. But if you look at these data definitions I've defined, and I think most people are in agreement with these. We're going to focus on semi-structured and structured data today. The model definitions here, this is a couple slides just to help you understand more what's going on behind the scenes. We talked about prompt engineering. There's a methodology called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, which improves the large language model by allowing you to pass documents to it to help it answer better on that. So think of the entire internet has been scanned, but what happens if you have documents that are sitting in your OneDrive that haven't been scanned, and you want to say, hey, go and use these documents? Now, a business could say, well, we want to create a bot that people can ask questions for customer service on how to repair, I'll use refrigerators. And the large language model never scanned information, deep information about the refrigerators that this company sells. And so you have the user manual, technical manual, and you say, here's all my technical manuals, go and use that in addition to the internet data, text data, and help answer the question better in that. That's one way to do it. Another way to improve the answer is to fine tune it, which is instead of RAG, which sends the documents each time on the fly to the large language model, is you update the large language model with the document and you create a new model. And there's pros and cons of going both ways on there. To compare the two, the fine tuning works great, but and improves the model with, say, those bunch of documents in there, but it's costly because now you have to go and generate a whole large language model, which could take a lot of time and money on there. And then each time you want to update it, you have to go and recreate the model. So how often do you want to do that? Every day you're going to go and do that. It's a lot of time and effort in there. Where the RAG method sends, as described here on the right side, sends that information up each time you ask a question in there, and therefore it's cheaper because you're not doing creating a new model in there, and it's real time, and because I can send this information over each time a question's asked, and I can just add new documents, and so I get the real time effect of it. This is essentially what's happening when you use ChatGPT now and you ask, well, what's the score of the football games today? It's going out and scanning the internet and finding that information and sending it back along with your question to the large language model to get the answer. And that's how it makes it real time. Because the large language model, remember when they first came out, it said all the data is as of like 6 months ago. So if you ask a question about the NFL scores, it's going to be like, I don't know anything for the last 6 months. Well, that changed when RAG method came out, and kind of that's the way how it works on that. And if we more in details on that, if you're using document intelligence with Microsoft, essentially it's taking these documents and pulling out the information and using document intelligence product and creating, taking that text and putting it into a search engine, Azure Cognitive Search, now called AI Search. And so when you ask a question in interface, it goes and it says, well, you could have thousands of documents. I don't want to send those all along to the large language model. So I'm going to go and look through this search index, this vector search, find the documents that are related to your question, and then pick out those documents and send it to the large language model along with your question. So you're limiting the documents that are sent over. So that's the way it works behind the scenes. Whenever you use Copilot or ChatGPT, is with the RAG method, this is the way it's working in there. And there's plenty of bots out there that you could send documents, whether you upload it or somebody creates a bot that behind the scenes is going and pulling that stuff automatically. All right. One more slide, and then I'll take some questions if you have them. I'm going to talk about using Gen AI on semi-structured and structured data, but only a couple of use cases. That's querying it and then cleaning the data or enriching the data. There's a lot of other use cases that I just thought of. And I asked ChatGPT, give me some other use cases, and hence created this slide where I could use Gen AI. Maybe I want to use it for anomaly detection. Go and look at this data and tell me anomalies on there. Or take this data and tell me trends, identify trends on there. So there's a lot of different ways you can use it. Even if you get a master data management or mapping fields together, it could be all useful in that. And I see a lot of companies building features in a product that do these kind of things. But today we're just going to talk about the first two in bold in here. So any questions? It also gives me a time to clear my voice and prevent from losing it by having some what's now cold coffee. All right, I don't think I see anything in the chat. Thanks for people adding things, supplementing what I'm talking about. Like Gemini is another large language model you can use from some other competing companies, some Microsoft. All right, ChatGPT on semi-structured data. This is what the GPT means. It's generative pre-trained transformer on there. And I didn't know about this until a few months ago. I was like, oh, what does GPT actually mean on there? And so this was the definitions of that. And we covered most of what this means on here. And the whole idea is to go and use a large language model and return text based on the questions that you ask. Well, ChatGPT is gone beyond text now. As I said, it does pictures now, and eventually it'll do video. But the gist of what we're going to talk about today, or we're going to demo today, is just using text. The other product that is used a lot is Copilot. I'm going to focus on ChatGPT. Whatever product you use, and you can add, and I put on here at the bottom left, there's Gemini, there's a few others in here. Just understand the capabilities of it, and there's different versions of everything. The important things is what documents can you upload that it supports here. And I've listed ChatGPT and Copilot, what they support. And then the max file size, because if you get in files at 50 megabytes, if it's larger than that, you have to chunk it up, and either you do that on your own or you use a tool that does this automatically, and there chunks up things on that. The other important thing to point out, if you're using Copilot, is only the enterprise version of Copilot supports file uploads in there. So hence I'm not going to go and show that one because you'd have to pay to use it. And so I focus on ChatGPT. Now underneath the covers, they work. I get very similar answers to both of them because they're both using a very similar large language model, or even the same one on there. And that's another part of it, is if you choose one, Copilot has ChatGPT 4. ChatGPT has 4.0 now, and there's a lot of other ones. As you go in there, you can choose those models. So make sure you understand which model you're choosing, because you can get very different answers for that. ChatGPT, somebody put in $20 subscription is worth it. I agree. This is some of the versions. There are a lot of them, and it's very confusing. So I put in here that if you're using the free version, it can't it doesn't support as many file uploads in there. So you may want to pay $20 a month to get more access to different file uploads and larger file load sizes in there. But there's a lot of different options in here. I'm not going to go over these. Now, with Copilot, it's even more choices. I work for Microsoft, and I'll be honest, I am confused to no end about all the Copilot versions, because they just announced a new one today. And it's confusing because they're now calling Office 365 Copilot apps. I don't quite understand it all. Within Microsoft, we have a subscription to Copilot, which is on the left column here. So it does more things like the file upload. The free version can support uploads, but only images on that. So it's really not useful for a demo unless I did the subscription version, which I don't want to do. Bottom line, these are all very confusing on here. If you think about Copilot, there's a version inside of Bing in there, and that's a Copilot version that you can use. Doesn't support uploads in there, but you can use it to interact with it in there. So this demo is going to be using ChatGPT, and I'm going to use it on some of my structured data. And I'll also point out there's a site, and I played a little bit with their demo, askondata.com, that in some ways can work even better than ChatGPT, because that product uses a large language model that was built on being able to update data easily or more precisely, because the big problem I'll go through with ChatGPT is you're trying to update data and it could be all over the place with it, whether it works or not. All right, so let me jump into the demo of ChatGPT, and I have a standby for when I used it the other day and it worked, because I don't know what I'm going to get. And if you play with ChatGPT, that's the one thing you know is you can ask a question today and it answers perfectly, and then you do the same with that question tomorrow and it's completely wrong on that. So it's very inconsistent. So this is where you may want to use a product like Ask on Data, or create your own interface, your own bot that you could train to be more accurate when it comes to updating data. It could be nothing more than you just create a bunch of prompts to say, if I ask this question, or if I'm asking you to modify data, assume this, and don't assume this, then and you put as part of your prompt more information that you can give it, so it does a better job at querying or transforming the data that you're asking from it. And you'll see some of that in AI skills and Fabric that does that automatically. So I can start out here and say, all right, I got this file, and in my case, it's a movie database. That's a CSV file, and this is something it supports. And I can start out just saying, hey, tell me about this file here. So the file gets uploaded, it stores it, and then I want to answer my question. Sometimes it gets very detailed one answer, sometimes it's very short on here. And this is actually a pretty good answer, where it comes up, it's got 75 rows. Here are the column names. This is very different. It usually doesn't give me sample data. It sometimes gives me one line or whatever. So this is where it's inconsistent. But you can see here when I uploaded it, it puts it into this data set, and I can always expand the table out here, and I can always download it. So as we go along and update things, you have the option to download it, hopefully, on here. So now I have this, it's in its data set memory on here, and I can go and say, list the movies with a rating of 10 or above, and show me the T-SQL. Actually, I shouldn't say T-SQL, it's SQL that you're using, but I could say I want it in T-SQL or Oracle SQL on here. So here it went, it queried this. This looked like it did it right. And here's the T-SQL that I can use. So you can see this is very useful too if you create a question that's complicated and you want to use that SQL in a database that you have, you can just copy the code in there. Now here's where I can get to the data cleaning part. I can say, hey, you know what? It says sci-fi on here. I don't like that. Change this to say science fiction. So cross my fingers, it's going to work. It's going to go in there and update it, and it did work, and display the new data set, of which I can download. So right away, you can see I can use this, transform it, and then download it. This could be a much easier and quicker way to doing things, and maybe put it in Excel or putting in a database and doing all this stuff on it. So I'm all doing this through the ChatGPT interface on here. And sometimes it doesn't have this little icon, so you can prompt it to say, give me a link so I can download it. So this is where it could be inconsistent. Now here's where we get to data enrichment. On here, I can do things, and this is where it gets really cool, to say, add 2 more columns and put in and search for the leading actor and actress in these movies, and create and populate those columns with it. Now I put first 10 rows because it works better if I don't say the whole data set. Other times it kind of goes off the rails. So let's see what happens here. And I'm giving it instructions to find that through Wikipedia or IMDb. And well, I'm lucky today you can see it worked. It found that information and populated it. Missed a couple there. That's all right. Sometimes they'll give you reasons why it didn't populate it, and there it is. Oh, it's really working well today. This morning I did the same thing and it was horrible on that. So this is working great. So imagine how long this would take to go and do this in your own. You'd have to go in each row and then go and search and all this. This is the beauty of it. Imagine the possibilities if you have thousands of movies in here. Now, another thing I can say is for the first 10 rows, go in there, create a one Oscar column and find out if the movie has won the Oscar for Best Picture. Not quite as lucky here. Oh, this is what happened before. It said Oppenheimer is not yet considered for an Academy Award, which it actually was. So I could tell it you're wrong, which if you know ChatGPT, you can correct it. And then you may say, and this is a good hint or tip, if you say you're wrong and then it says, sorry, I'm wrong, and then it fixes it, you can say, tell me what I could have changed in my prompt so you don't make this mistake again. And then it'll come back and say, change your prompt to this. And that doesn't always work, but that's a way to prompt engineering to find out better prompts you can make by asking it, how can I make a better prompt? All right, now the last thing I'll ask is go and look up the movie gross for all of this. Again, this will be very manually time consuming to do it. Well, this is the best it's ever done. It's accurate here. It found all the movies, came up with some little information for me. Awesome. I can now, and notice it doesn't have the download link on here. So I can go in here and say, give me the option to download this updated data set here. And it'll give me that, and I can now download that file, right? So that's the demo. You imagine the possibilities. I love this because I could do things like I'm a runner and not a very good one, but I could have it track all of my days that I ran, and I can say create two columns that has the temperature and the humidity on there. So instead of me looking it up, which could take me forever, boom, it comes up like that. I can use it for and here's a baseball players list. Go and find the current teams there are and create a column that puts it on there. So it's just amazing what you can do with that. Okay, so question. Ask if you tried it with the O1 models. No, I have not. The other models, they're usually smaller. And if you go up here, you can see there's more models, and I'm paying the $20 for this, and but I only have a choice of, well, I don't have any other choice, just a legacy model in there. Now, I could use some other product and use other models, and I haven't gone that far to try it yet on that. So it'd be interesting to see how well it does. I've done this with Copilot. It doesn't do as good a job as ChatGPT. But there's a lot of other models I haven't tried that maybe would better on this. But I'm just happy this actually worked because I gave myself about a 10% chance that it would be accurate, but it worked today. Other questions? Oh yeah, it rounded up in there, so you can go, you can tell it don't round it up. Why did it round up one and not the others? I don't know. Maybe it found this someplace. I can ask, where did you find this? And maybe it points me to a site, and I go there, and it has it listed that way. So this is where you have to check how accurate these results are on that. Don't assume everything in there. Now you can see at the bottom here, ChatGPT can make mistakes. They put that everywhere now because a lot of people took it verbatim and didn't realize that it could be wrong. Whew, all right, so let's move forward on there to the next section and demo is using Fabric or using Fabric AI skills, a feature of Microsoft Fabric on structured data on here. If you're not used to using Fabric, I don't want to have this turn into what is Fabric, but in short, it's just a way to collect data and put it in lake houses or warehouses and query it and use Power BI on top of it on that. Because it's collecting all this data in here, you can use Power BI to ask to find answers to questions you have that are more specific questions in here. But imagine if I go one step further and start using Q&A like ChatGPT, but not on data I'm uploading, but actually data that's stored within Fabric. And that's the whole idea. Generative AI on your data, which is structured data, sitting in a lakehouse or a warehouse, relational type of data on there. Definitely tables with rows and columns in there. And so this allows you to have conversations with your data. On the bottom here, it supports lakehouses, warehouses, coming sooner, semantic models, and KQL databases for those that know what they are. And then I could share the bot essentially that I'm creating. Not only can I use it within Fabric, but I could publish it out to teams, and you can start using teams, or I could make it part of my own application I'm building in a product like Azure AI Foundry on there. And so I'm taking this feature and putting it in the bot where I can add other features and do other things with it, but it's doing all the work to query data sitting in structured database in there. The way this works at a high level is you're going to create what's called an AI skill within Fabric. You're going to select the tables that you want to allow English queries to be asked of. You're going to configure it to make it perform better through hints and example queries. And then I could use the bot within Fabric and play with it and test it, but then you're generally going to want to publish it out for other people to use. So they don't have to go within Fabric and use it. They can use it in some kind of application or within Teams, however you decide. How this works at a high level, also being a little more specific, is I'm going to ask a question. It's going to take all the metadata of the tables I select. I can put in notes that I'll demo, and I can example questions and queries, and all that are using a RAG method to send it to the large language model, which returns a T-SQL query that is executed on the data and passes back the results. So you're not passing any data to the large language model. You're just asking the large language model to create a query to help answer my question. And that's it. To use this, if those familiar with Fabric, is you have to turn it on in the tenant settings. And once you do that, you're good to go and play with it here. And what I'm going to demo here is this link here is actually just following that demo. So you can do it on your own. So to pull up that, I'm in Fabric here. And this is a workspace I've created that's got already added to was Lakehouse, and that link to that demo I showed you will build this AdventureWorks data warehouse for you so you can play with it. But you can use any Lakehouse that you have access to in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an AI skill. So in Fabric, there's a new item you can choose, an AI skill, and I can just give it a name such as, let me just use, I'm in version 4 here. Now this is going to jump into the interface to build out this AI skill where I'm going to ask the questions here. So the first thing it's going to do is like, well, okay, where's the data that you want to ask questions of? And I'm going to say the AdventureWorks here. And then it's going to say, okay, great. What tables do you want to use within AdventureWorks to ask questions on? Because maybe you don't want to use everything in there. There could be tons of tables in there. So select the tables on here. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to choose 10 tables on here. And what's happening is this is going to pull out the metadata of these tables and pass it to the large language model along with the questions that I ask of it. So this is where it's going to make things faster if you don't select hundreds of tables if you're not going to need them. Hence this interface here. So I go through and these are the 10 I'm going to want to use. All right, great. So let's start asking questions. What is the most product sold in here? So it's going to go look at all this data and come up with an answer on here. So again, it's not passing the data, but rather passing all this information, the question, the metadata, and then creating a SQL statement that it thinks is going to generate the answer for me. That's what the large language model does. And then this interface will take that SQL from the large language model and go and query the database and or the lake house, I should say, and then pass that information back along with the query on here. So as it's going, this usually only takes a few seconds. Do you have to embed or chunk the data set in the Fabric RAG selection? No, it does that. This is where it's just using the metadata in there. So it's not passing a lot of data. So there's really nothing to chunk, and that's where it's a little confusing. It's not doing anything with the data. The large language model is not doing anything with the data, right? Rather, it's passing in just an information of the metadata on here. And here it comes back and it doesn't like me. So it's coming back with NA, which I don't know what that means on here. So I got lucky with the first demo. This one's having a little more issues on it. No matter, I can just jump to where I've done this before. So what will happen is it usually passes back an answer that's not correct because it had assumed something that it assumed wrong on here. And this is where I can use hints now, because it usually passes back an answer called water bottle, right? But if I look at the SQL, when it passed back water bottle, it assumed that the most sold product was based on quantity, but I actually wanted it based on revenue, not quantity on here. So I can go and tell it through a hint to use the sales revenue and not the quantity. Oh, look, now it worked. All right, so it came back with that. So now if I look at the query it used, there is where it came back with the quantity on here. So I'm going to say, well, wait a minute. If I go under this AI instructions, this is essentially a hint. Whenever somebody asks about most sold, go by revenue and not quantity. So then if I put that in there and then ask the question again, I should get the accurate answer, or the answer that I believe is more accurate on it. So it's gonna, as I showed before, take this hint and pass that along with it using the RAG methodology. And this should come back with a different answer, which it did. And that is the Mountain Black 56, which is right. If I look at the query, you can see it's now using the total revenue. All right, so I'm getting a little lucky today. Now, I could ask another question to say, what is the average sales amount per order by territory? So let's see how this works. And as I'm waiting, what capacity you're running, it is F64 on there. I think, I can't remember. I think F64 may be required to use AI skills. I'll have to double check about that. And the costs on there are based on tokens. And there, I suggest you read about how all that works. And all of that metadata and the question are all counted as tokens. So you're as part of being charged in there. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that. And I've seen people that just have gone crazy using this, and they have a huge bill because they didn't realize how much of this was actually being pass it elements tokens on here. So you can see this actually worked too well. It came back, and usually what happens is it doesn't put in the name here. It has IDs of United States 1, France 3, Germany 6 on here. And this is what it used. Now I could say, well, this is great, but I actually wanted to order it differently. So another thing, in addition to hints, is example queries, where I can come in here and say, here's a query that somebody, a SQL query that somebody may ask. If they ask that query, here is the exact SQL I want you to return. And this is now passed to the large language model once I enter it. Now it validates the SQL here. Okay, great. Let me go back to that question and put it in there. And in the SQL statement, I had an order by class clause in there. So it should return very similar. But now you can imagine, and it doesn't have to be the exact same SQL. It's really just hints that you're giving it. So somebody asks a question that's very close but not exact, it'll still use that SQL. Or maybe at the very least, it'll change that SQL, but it's using that as a template to build out the query on there. So you may want to go and put in a bunch of different SQL queries on there as you monitor this, and there's tools to do that and see if people are getting the wrong answers or whatnot. You can tune essentially you're tuning it through hints and SQL queries to make the answers more accurate. All right, so if we come back with NA, I don't know why it did it. Let me try it again. On here, it'll be interesting. It's like, what steps did it? Unable to generate a query. It's being moody today on here, and I guess I was a little bit too lucky with going on here. So, all right, this time it worked on here. Now you could see it didn't quite use the query on that. So I'm maybe at 75% accuracy today. This is the challenge of large language models. You never know what's going to come back with in there. So why it didn't work, I don't know, because I used the exact query that was a sample on there, but we'll blame the weather for this one on that. Now, if I ask it again, it's probably going to, it may return the correct answer on here. But this is the problem you're going to have with large language models. As much as hints as you give it, you never know when it could come off with a wrong answer on there. Now it comes NA. So no more on that. So eventually, if I get this working correctly, I can then publish it. So on the publish here is where I can go and say, I want to publish this out. It's kind of like compiling it. And then here's the URL I can use inside my code in order to send questions to it. All right. So I don't have to go with, I can share this with people who are using Fabric, and they can go and use this interface. I can also create a URL that people can use in a different environment. I could use this. I can share this within Teams if I wanted to, and so they use a team interface for this instead of within Fabric on that. And the way that would work is so there's the publish, and then there's the share in the top right, and this is where, as I was saying before, I can share this out and choose I want to share it with an email link, or maybe I want to use it within Teams, right? And so boom, just think of how awesome this would be to have a bot like this sitting there and working in Teams. All right, and there you go. All right, so we got a question.
Yeah, James. In this regard, where are you going to put your security, right? For example, whenever you're going to share the link in the Teams, and I'm assuming only who should be able to see the data or have access to the database, they should only able to do it, right?
Yeah. So there's a ways in here to. This gets into, if you publish an app, you may want to have security within an app, but you can also have security in here where you can specify who can actually query that particular data set on here. So that's another way of securing it. I actually haven't played with that in a while, so I can't remember where that is.
No, that's fine. I expect there should be some kind of settings where you should be able
Yeah,
to do it. Yeah.
yeah.
I have another question, James,
Go
which is
ahead.
like you're showing this from Fabric. However, for example, I don't have Fabric. Am I still able to do from General SQL, Azure SQL database, similar things, or no?
To build this interface, you have to have Fabric. No way around that.
Okay.
To have other people use what you've built, that's where the sharing comes into play. So I can share this on Teams, or somebody can use that URL link in an app, and they're good to go in there. But you need to have Fabric to build out this interface, this bot, I want to call it.
So it means data must need to reside in the Fabric. So if I have the data in SQL, Azure SQL, I don't have that functionality to do all
Right.
that.
It's
Okay.
only within Fabric, and right now within Fabric in lake houses and warehouses, and I said soon to be semantic models and KQL. Now you could this could you could have shortcuts in your lakehouse that point to data that could be sitting in SQL Server or SQL database or another data lake. That's the use of shortcuts, kind of outside the scope of that. So right here, I'm using it on data that is located within Fabric, but it could also be a shortcut.
No, thank you, James. I think there is another person, Mark.
Yeah,
You have a
Mark?
question, Mark? Please go ahead.
Yeah, hey James, thanks for this. To me, this kind of highlights an area that I'm engaged in around data governance, right? It looks like this AdventureWorks is obviously very cleanly set up with, all your fact and dimension tables, and I'm assuming there's a solid model behind this. What's your view in terms of the need for that sufficient governance? Because I do feel that a lot of businesses are really struggling with that, and that's where a lot of the kind of potential I don't know, the whole data hype and the AI hype, it feels like people get a bit frustrated with data opportunities, and we haven't necessarily come onto that AI frustration because we haven't got the governance behind all of this good work, which obviously you clearly do in AdventureWorks as an example database. What's your view on that?
I think we should just trust each other and not have to worry about governance. No, just kidding. That's obviously a very big topic, especially within federal civilians companies I deal with. I was on a call this morning with Homeland Security. They're using, as you can imagine, quite sensitive data, and the topic was governance on there. And what can I do to prevent people from seeing data that they shouldn't on that? But that's a whole other subject matter, and we can go over securing the data outside of Fabric, within Fabric. There's a lot of different ways of securing things in either in a workspace or at the data lake level. In there, there's a thing coming out in Fabric called One Security that puts the security with the data for column level security, row security, and dynamic data masking. All that stuff can be attached to the data. But I'm glad you brought it up because it's a huge topic, and you don't want to willy-nilly go and create a bot and not think through of, well, if I go and publish this and somebody has a URL, now they're going to go see data they shouldn't. So there's a lot to that answer in there, but definitely should be top of mind when you go and building out a bot. Spend a lot of time thinking through how you're governing and securing that data. This also gets into other products like Purview and whatnot of how you can go and about and monitor that data to see if it's sensitive.
Because I mean, obviously, governance goes a lot further than just that security aspect. I mean, something I consider around a big concern is hallucinations of AI models, where you've got insufficient, a business glossary definition, for example, or inconsistent structuring of data, and people are just kind of randomly throwing these questions that just create junk, and everyone thinking, oh, it should be so much easier than this because I've seen someone write a question and out pops a perfect answer. And I think obviously ChatGPT has got that very well structured, as does Copilot and all the others. When organizations go and do this, and the challenges of data management in an organization, I think it's going to be a lot harder to really get that discipline and make it as easy as people think it might be.
Yeah, a great point. And I would say I can come back to this user group and have a whole conversation for an hour just on data governance and how you can do that. But your point is very valid that you need to think through all of that. And in addition, that the answers could be wrong. So, and can I ask questions that it's going to make it elucidate and return data that it shouldn't? You know, can people find ways around it on that? So, yeah. So thanks. And let me jump. I know we're even past an hour, and here a couple more slides. That ends the demo portion of that. A few more things to point out as we go along. Difference between AI skill and Copilot. I get this question a lot on here. Essentially, with AI skill, you can configure it to behave the way you want. Because if you say, why don't I use Copilot on that? You can't configure Copilot and give it hints for the most part, or at least built-in hints and things like that. So there's a lot more flexibility and configuration-wise you can do with AI skill. I don't want to go too much into this, but it's really is an advance and a step up from Copilot when dealing with structured data on there. If you think of some industry use cases now, because the idea is now I can combine the old school way of unstructured data sitting in documents with the new school way of data sitting in semi-structured and databases. So I went to ChatGPT and said, give me some use cases for the healthcare industry. And here's one. Imagine you have data that is clinical notes, stuff doctors write that's unstructured, sitting in PDF documents or Word documents. I'm trying to have whatever tool I'm using, ChatGPT, Copilot, any large language model, to help me with treatment of this person. And I want to take not only the notes from the doctor, but I could have structured data that has, say, diagnostic codes that I want to use or other information about this patient. None of the tools will do all this combination automatically. So you may want to create a bot that is going to allow you to upload all those doctor's notes or point to where it's all located. It's also going to know where the structured data is. And that application you create can allow people to ask questions for this particular patient. And behind the scenes, it could pull in the structured and semi-structured and unstructured data and send that all to the large language model and come back with an answer of this is the best treatment for this customer, or this patient, I should say, on that. So that's where we're going. I imagine maybe AI still down the road will have a way to also another button, upload semi or unstructured data in as part of that, as opposed to having to go kind of code that. So it can generate the URL for structured data. Imagine I put that in an app along with code that's going to go and pull the data that's unstructured from other places in there. So I haven't seen any tool that does all this yet through an interface in there, but I'm sure that's coming. Now, there's a lot. I'll send this deck out. There's a lot of other use cases you can imagine in retail or finance where you can combine unstructured and structured data to provide maybe better fraud detection on there. And because it was the NFL season, and if I had more time, I would go through this. But imagine using large language models to help with game strategy, injury risk assessments, all the stuff you can do during practices and during the week of an NFL game. But imagine now going one step further during the game, using it for play calling or defensive adjustments in there. It's coming. Now, the NFL is not going to allow this, I'm sure. But imagine a world where maybe, I don't know, you're Pop Warner football and you want to get really sophisticated with your team. And now I'm pulling in all this information in real time through the bot I created. Now, a question is fantasy football. So I have to say, I've been using this for my fantasy football team. It's very challenging to come up with a prompt that is really helping you with your fantasy football team, because it just goes off the rails with things. And so I'm still working on that. It helped me a little bit. I won my fantasy football league this year, in very small part to the large language model. Where I had more success with it is in predicting NFL winners. Microsoft internally, I'm going to go off the rails here, but has a NFL team pool that you go and choose the winner straight up without point spreads. I started at the beginning of the year and I said, I'm going to create a prompt for this. And it was a prompt that was a couple of paragraphs. And as the season went on, I kept adding to it. And I would say, well, put more weight on injuries or how they played last week or how they did with that team before, home and away. And that it grew into many paragraphs in here on that. And I kept updating the prompt, and it would go off the rails. I mean, it would come back with incorrect records, and I would say, no, use the team records from the NFL site. Here's the link. It still would come back with wrong answers. I eventually had to copy and paste and say, use this as the win-loss records in there. So there's all these things you find out that it just don't do really well on here, but it came back and it gave up a summary, and I said, make sure you explain why you're choosing one over the other. And I followed that pretty much to the T. There was a few times I didn't agree with it, but I wound up, out of 650 people, I came in 12th on that, 72% accuracy. So I blame that, the reason for that is largely because of large language models, and I was using ChatGPT for that. So interesting way of doing it. So the final slide here is to now think about, I'm pulling in structured and unstructured data. There's two approaches, architecture approaches for that. The traditional, or maybe the old school way, is I could take data that I have in a relational database and supplement that with data that I get from documents. So I could use a product like Azure AI Document Intelligence and say, here are my documents, pull out all the data in here and add it to this table along with the other structured data that I have. And then I can start doing queries on that data in there. So I'm not using large language models in there, other than once I do all that, I could then use large language models to ask questions that would create queries, as I just demoed in there. But large language models are not used on the data itself. They're just, you can think of it not even being used at all. And this is one way to combine data, unstructured and documents, with relational database. This is really the one approach you'd want to use to make sure you're 100% accurate, because you're going to have structured data and you're going to create dashboards and reports off that. And so this is great for accuracy, but it doesn't use LLM to help with better answers. What I just demoed is the Gen AI way, the new way of doing it, that could take that unstructured and structured data and mash it together. Imagine creating that bot, as I talked about, that's going to do all that automatically, and use large language model to help with that patient and come up with a better treatment plan for them. With the con, it could be not accurately pulling from those documents. So you may upload documents and say, use this document, but it can misinterpret things and whatnot. And you could be using CSV file that doesn't really have a lot of metadata, so it doesn't really understand it well enough in there. And I should actually put, it could hallucinate in here and not give you accurate answers in there. So there's two different approaches on that. And hopefully we'll see a product that comes along that uses that second architecture approach, where it combines everything automatically and allows you to give it hints and sample queries and all that to be not 100% accurate, but maybe be 95% accurate on that. There's helpful blogs that I've gone into detail in a few blogs on more understanding of what OpenAI and large language models are and using Copilot. A side note, I have a book on deciphering data architectures. I always make this offer for people that are present in my presentations. You can order on Amazon. If you say, I'd rather have a free copy, send me an email, and I'll give you a free copy of this book. This is data architectures. This is somewhat related to what I was talking about now when it comes about structured data, but if you're interested in this, just shoot me an email. And that's it. So I know maybe we have a little bit of time for questions. If you want to send me an email for questions, happy to to take follow-ons on there. And if you want to ask some questions now, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, we still have some time, at least next 5 to 10 minutes. Anyone would like to any question, please feel free to use this time. Yeah, Manfred, please go ahead.
Hi, James. First of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation today. I've been dealing a lot as a technical author with data XML on the structured side. So I have learned a lot today about, different methods about integrating the unstructured data. So thanks for that. But what would you recommend for people like myself that only have data XML well-structured data?
Yeah, so XML data could be confused through the model on here. If you upload an XML document, it could be hit or miss whether it understands it, because you have the metadata along with the data in there. Now, I've tried this once before and it actually worked really well, pretty well, I would say, in understanding the data correctly. This is where the prompt engineering comes in there. If you start asking questions on XML data and it's wrong, can you change the prompt to give it hints to make the accuracy? And so if you're trying to just say maybe do queries off that XML data on there, you're going to want to probably give it a number of hints, especially if the XML data has like codes on there. Like when I was doing it, it had codes and I was like, oh, it doesn't know what these codes are. And I said in the hint, go to this website, here's where all the codes are, or upload this document that here's the codes and what they mean on there. But you can certainly use it, and it just may be questionable of how well it understands the XML document, which in large part is going to be like how well the XML document has metadata in it that it can understand.
Okay, very interesting. I might contact you via email for more intricate questions, and thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, sure. And I could learn something too of you trying it out on here. It, as I said before, it can go really off the rails and sometimes be challenging to get a correct answer. I kind of got lucky with the ChatGPT demo, but when I did it this morning, everything was wrong. It even went out and said, when I said to go to Wikipedia IMDb, it said, okay, I'm going to go do that. Hold on. And then it didn't do anything. And I was like, what are you doing in there? And so it could go really, really weird sometimes.
Yep. Okay, thanks again.
Thank you, Manfred. We have more questions. Sabas, you're going to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, James, for a wonderful session. And my question is about that. How can I use this solution? Let's say I want to do a ERP data assessment about the quality checks, about the data quality validation. So if my source files are mostly from COBOL, and how can I integrate these solutions and do proper data validation or a quality check?
Yeah, so that's something you may want to do outside of everything I showed you. So if you look at I know I'm touting Microsoft products, but there's the product called Purview. It has total data quality checks within it, and it'll look at your data and based on the business rules you give it, say whether the data is accurate or not, and give you a score, and then you can go and fix that data. There's products out there like Prophecy. It's a master data management, but it has a data quality piece in there that you can give business rules, and that will actually go and fix the data on there. You can write scripts to do that. So a lot of the data governance part is going to be done before you even get to where I went. So the data, when I showed you, was already in a database in a lake house. That data was already been cleaned and qualities checked and all that. If I'm going to have somebody go against a source, I may want to either just tell them, make sure your data quality is good, or give them some option to go and clean the data before you get into it, because that large language model can go haywire with wrong answers if your data quality is all over the place on there. It can misinterpret things. It could assume things that are completely wrong in there. So data governance that we were talking earlier could be a whole subject matter where and this is where I have a lot of customers, and we reiterate, before you get to this point where you're using large language models, you need to make sure the data is all cleaned. And we get into that whole using Fabric to clean the data and how you can do that, and make sure that is done before you even get to the AI skill or large language model part.
Thanks, James. Yeah, thank you. I'll get back to you if I need more info. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
We got two more questions, James. Are you okay to take those?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Gideon, you want to go ahead?
All right. Thank you so much, James, for the wonderful session. Personally, I come from a software engineering background, and this is more like of a general question. So considering that we are in the era of AI, generative AI, Copilot, ChatGPT, what will be the future for the engineers going forward, considering how these AIs has taken revolution in terms of engineering code and everything? What will be the future?
Yeah, I love people concerned about what does this mean for my job and all that stuff. Your job is not going away. All you think of large language models, I tell people, it's just an accelerator. It's like the days when we didn't have dictionaries and dictionaries came along. Well, it wasn't making you write any quicker or better. It just was helping to be more accurate. And then we had online word processing, and it's spell checked automatically in there. And okay, it makes it easier to write things, but it doesn't replace a writer on that. This is the same thing. Large language models are just accelerators, and this is not going to replace. You still need modelers and engineers to go and build this. Now, it's like my son's a coder, and he's like, he uses ChatGPT and other variations all the time to help him with the code and to debug things, but it could be wrong a lot. And that's the biggest thing, is you have to have somebody overseeing it to make sure the answers are correct. I mean, I use it. I'll have customers ask me questions about how do I do this in Fabric, and I'll go, well, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, and I'll say, ChatGPT, here's my customer's question, answer it, and be very detailed and provide the steps to go and implement what the question they're asking. And I'll come out with this, and sometimes it's spot on, and I'll just copy and paste that in my customer, and they're like, wow, that was a great answer. Thanks for the detail. But often it's wrong. And I have to say, well, wait a minute, you're wrong, to ChatGPT, and I'll give it some more information. And then I'll be like, hey, sorry, I'm wrong. Here's the correct answer. I may have to do that a few times before I finally get the right answer that I can cut and paste. But it's very dangerous to just take it at face value. So you always need somebody overseeing it. The person overseeing it's got to know about whatever the topic is, whether you're coding, data engineering, writing ETL, they have to know a lot in order to make sure the answer is correct. So I just see all this as a great accelerator. If you, within Fabric now, there is Copilot, where you go in there and say, go and create a transformation step to clean this data, and you tell it everything you need to do, and it goes and it builds it out. But it could be inaccurate. You don't want to just trust it, because now you can, part of governing data is you can go and say, look, it created it. I don't need to be a data engineer, and you go and put that in production, and it completely screws up the data in there. So you have to have somebody overseeing it. But it could be that accelerator where it builds it out, and maybe it's not 100% accurate, but it's 80% accurate. And you're like, well, that saved me a bunch of hours. Now let me go and fix it and all that stuff. So that's how I see this, is just as a great accelerator.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Okay. Next, BD Softly. If you unmute yourself and ask the question.
Good afternoon, long-time caller, first-time listener. A little curious, can you feed data from an API into the language model to update it? In particular, your comment about the sports, and I used to coach, so this is kind of an intriguing thing as it popped up when you mentioned that. Of would you be able to pull down, real-time data off of an API and put it into the model?
Yeah. within Fabric, everything in there is could be operated through APIs. So I could take real-time data and use APIs to populate a lakehouse, and then have a model, that a bot that's created that is using the data in real time on that. So you can certainly do that on there. I've been a soccer coach for 20 years, and I have a use case that I didn't show, but about Premier League. And imagine what soccer coaches or football coaches, cold over there, can do for training and then for real time. Help me with the formations before the game and help me make adjustments during the game, because I'm pulling in all this data in real time, and I could use Fabric to be that interface. You probably want to use something that has more coding flexibility, something maybe in Python that can call all these APIs and generate those results in real time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Imagine if you come up with something like this and you go and present it to a coach in the NFL or baseball or Premier League, and they go like, "Oh my God, I could use this at halftime to make adjustments." And they're running billion-dollar teams with players that are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and it could be mean one extra win. Boy, that could be worth a lot of money to build a solution like that. The challenge will be is the leagues allowing something like that, but you can imagine during the games, but you can imagine before and after the games that stuff like that could be used. And there's a lot of analytical departments. I've had talks with people that work for the NFL in analytics that are starting to look into using Gen AI to help with those decisions. Imagine, who should I trade for? Who should I get free agency? All that stuff could be used in a large language model.
Yeah, and the stats department that some of the major league teams have got is quite impressive, because I had a friend of mine that works for a professional team for a while.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go. And you look at, like, they just signed Soto for, away from the Yankees, my favorite team, for what was it, $750 million. We're close to $1 billion contracts on there, and so all this technology could be used to great advantage. Imagine if it's a difference between a win or a loss, and getting in the playoffs or not, or winning the World Series or not, which is billions and millions of dollars. So if I'm owning a team, I'm hiring all the best and brightest to be my analytical, to help me with these decisions, or help the coach with the decisions. And you find a lot of pushback with the older generation, but they're kind of getting old and dying off, and new generations are coming in that are all about analytics.
So James, we have one more person. Sean, you're gonna go ahead and ask the question.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Now I'm approaching this from a different perspective. So I have quite a bit of experience, or a decent amount of experience, in qualitative data analysis. Qualitative is like survey results for open-ended questions and things like that. And I usually use like Navivo and pretty expensive qualitative data analysis tools, and do not have the access right now. And last year I did do a lot of analysis with OpenAI and the data set and everything, but I'm wondering what I don't know, because we're getting a pretty large survey that will have, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 responses, and they can be quite lengthy. And that's over like 12 questions. I just am wondering what I don't know and what you can point me to. Because I know things have changed in the past year, and
yeah, it's changed a lot. These models have gotten a lot better, and there's even add-ons that you can use that work for specific use cases like math and whatnot to make it even better. And that actually is a good thing I should mention in the next time I talk about this. And we have a lot of government agencies that they're all about surveys on there. So we're using large language models to help them compile the results, make sure they're accurate, find where there could be repetitive surveys that were answered by the same person. Even though you don't have their name, it can kind of figure that out, find anomalies in there. Hey, this survey, here's the questions and the answers. Give me some more ideas of what other questions I should be asking on that. So there's just tons of stuff that you can use through AI. Now, you can use Copilot ChatGPT for a lot of that. You could wind up building your own bot that collects this data. So there's things within Azure, like one thing called Information Assistant, that you could, it's public, that you can use to create an interface where I can upload documents through a bot and ask questions, and it kind of builds out the infrastructure on top of Azure for that. So you don't have to go and build your own, or at least you could start from scratch with that. So I would be thinking about what kind of interface could I build that can collect all this data, send it to a large language model, and then have people ask questions of that. Because it could even be, okay, you have all this data, and I'm going to create a bot that allows people in my company to go ask questions of those survey results, instead of me trying to create a report or put it in some relational database or what. Here's all the results in PDF. And I've seen customers then take the PDF documents. Once they get the results back, they take the PDF documents, and it could scan them and pull out all the answers, because maybe people hand wrote things in there. The technology is there that I can pull all of it out, and you can say, put it in the table that I'm going to ask, that I'm going to create reports of that. And there, you have to double check to make sure it did it all correctly. But that's where imagine trying to do all that manually, have people look at it and write the answers. And if you have tens of thousands of documents, which some of our government agencies do, and they've been manually doing that, which could take weeks, now we can say you can do that in a matter of hours on that by building out this bot that uploads the documents, use AI document intelligence to pull it out, and then use large language models that verifies and fixes and corrects and all that data, but then also allows people to ask questions off of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Feel free to email me, and we can hop on a call and we can discuss it more, and I can give you some more details of what I've seen people do with it. But as you said, you don't know what you don't know. And you start thinking through, like, oh, look at all these things I can do with it. I mean, I remember with ChatGPT when I first came out, and I was asking these questions, and I didn't realize all the things it can do. And then, oh my God, I can use it for this. And now I use it a lot for last few months as personas. Pretend you are this person, and I'm going to debate you, and I can practice debating with ChatGPT because I gave it the information. You're the debater. This is the topic. Answer at this sophistication level on there. Or another crazy idea, I'm reading a book now on the Crusades. I want to learn more about the Crusades. I told ChatGPT, pretend you were a knight during the first Crusades, and I want to ask questions. What a great way to learn. And I went in there and I started asking questions.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's such a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Oh my
Dave.
God. The personas.
That's fun.
Think of it being personas on there. And now I've got a whole persona in a list of things. You could even go in there for your kids, pretend you're Santa, and they're going to ask you questions. And now with ChatGPT, you can use the interface of questions and answers, the microphone. I gave it to my grandson, and I said, Santa's on the phone, talk to him. And he started talking to him. And at first it was a little awkward. Next thing I know, he's having long conversations with Santa on there. And I had to pull him away and say, Vincent, dinner's ready. He's like, well, no, I want to keep talking to Santa on there. It was because they would also respond with questions like, what's your favorite toy, and all this stuff. And it just blows my mind. But think of personas now. You can even be persona if you're in a game. Like I used to play these games, Wizardry and Adventure and all this. Pretend you're the game Adventure. And my God, I don't know how it does it, but it acts just like the game. But then you can Dungeons and Dragons. But then you can say, well, be the game, but be more easy to solve, or be more sophisticated, or be less sophisticated, or add this character into it. It's really amazing. And now you can say, draw this character, create a picture of this character. All right,
thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that helps. Personas. Think of personas.
Thank you
Thank you
so much.
so
Thank you so much,
James.
James. I know we're a little bit over time, but it's super engaging. The very first event of the month. I'm feeling so glad that you all joined here and had a great conversation. I think we could go up more time, but time we have kind of limited time. So thank you so much. And James, it's always pleasure to have you in our session. Hopefully we're gonna see you in person. I see you last year, but yeah, hopefully see you next time. Yeah, I think I'll get the PPT from you, James. Then I'll share with the team who have joined
Okay.
today.
That works. Well, thanks everybody. Hopefully you learned a lot. This is a very new presentation. So thanks for the great questions and give me some ideas to make the presentation better.
That's fantastic.
you.
Thanks, James. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hosting Toronto. I miss you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.